Good morning. How are you? I am still by the sea, as you can tell from the backdrop. I'm not walking because the closer I get to it, the less you can hear me. So I thought if you wanted to hear what I had to say, it'd be better if I did it this way instead. It's chilly here. I've put my feet in the water and I felt frozen, so I haven't swum there. But I have very much enjoyed the sound, as you can hear, of the ocean and the feel in the air of salt water. I mean, it's very subtle, but it's there. And there was a celebration of antique cars here, and that's over now, and so people are honking less and traffic is even lighter. But on to the news. There are two things that sort of dominated the news for the last, since October, I think, and it's Trump, and it's also the Middle East. On the Middle East, the International Criminal Court has requested warrants for the arrest of Netanyahu, who's the head of the Israeli government, and the head of Hamas, basically for starving people in connection with their attacks on each other, particularly when it comes to starving. I guess you could say it's Israeli. But in both directions there are, if you will, war crimes. We have the innocent, we have children, we have non-combatants. And they're asking that both sides be prosecuted for their criminal conduct. It is interesting that we have to reach to an international criminal court rather than those nation states that are entangled with one or the other, involved in this war of extermination on behalf of the Israelis, as they've said it, and Hamas is unrepentant in its position. And people take the position that if you could be for peace, that somehow or other you favor the other. Also, if you take a position based on the merits of a religious war or a law for property, a war for property, you run into the situation in which you are either anti-Muslim or anti-Semitic just by the position you take on what these nation states prefer to do. That's just wrong. You cannot equate being against a race or religion or whatever based on the conduct that they have, because the religion does not necessarily prompt the conduct. Indeed, in Israel, and we only know this because we have better access to information, there's a problem in the government against Netanyahu for how extreme he wants to be. And the United States that has said that it would stand behind Israel takes a step back from going in and exterminating remaining elements in Gaza and elsewhere in Rafah. So we have a very troubling situation. I'm not sure that this dramatic change that is seeking arrest warrants will make a difference. They have to in turn be issued by the court, so that remains to be seen. I assume there'll be arguments against it. And then there's the question of enforcement. Israel is not a signatory to the criminal court, so they're not bound by it. But if they travel anywhere, which is entirely possible, then they would be exposed to it. So that's one thing. The second is the discussion about the trial. I am astonished that the commentators spend a great deal of time talking about why the government's going to lose. I don't understand that. I don't mean that you can't discuss the strength of the defense, but there is no strength in the defense. The defense is, well, reasonable doubt. It's a number of things that you can't pick up. It's like picking mercury up from the floor. It's a dangerous thing to do, and it's impossible to achieve. And the only thing that happens is that you may harm yourself. The government talks about how the defense attorney, Blanche, wanders and repeats himself and so forth, and I think that's probably a function of Trump directing him. But then the commentaries are the same thing. People are saying things like, oh, I wouldn't do this, and I wouldn't do that, and I wouldn't do the other thing. And the story is a relatively simple story. I mean, if you believe it, if you believe the evidence is sufficient, and I do, obviously. And I can't imagine if I were commenting on the case, I would say this was anything than a slam dunk, short of there being corruption involving threats to the jurors. it is hard for me to understand how, with the information we have at hand, even separate from the witnesses, and I'm talking about other than document witnesses and so forth, the key witnesses, it's hard for me to understand how you could find any other result but conviction. And there are 34 counts, and any person who would disagree with the prosecution would have to stand up and say that for each and every one of those, he believed or she believed an acquittal. Now, the wild card, I suppose, are the two attorneys on the jury, the petit jury, and the question is, how do they see their role individually? One of the two, as I understand it, is a litigator, and that may inform his judgment as to how to approach the facts, or he may try to take a leadership role. Same may be true of the other one. Those are the kind of wild cards I see. Corruption, and or for within the jury, someone with an expertise differing with the government out of ego or out of genuine belief. Short of those exceptional instances, I don't think that the defense counsel has laid a glove on Michael Cohen. When Michael Cohen is lying, he's lying for Trump. When he's prosecuted and talks afterwards, he's telling the truth, or mostly the truth, and he's hemmed in by documents and other witnesses as to what the truth is. So what can we expect? When Blanche finally runs out of gas, repeating himself, asking the same question over and over again, and I think the prosecution might have done well to sort of try to trim his sails for two reasons. One is that's the right thing to do, and the other is that I think it would win points with the jury that also is intelligent enough that a question was asked and answered. I think, in a way, you're doing even the defense a favor by cutting them short, because going on and asking the same question over and over suggests you don't know what you're doing, and I think that is the case. I once had an argument before a judge, and the judge stopped me and said, "Mr. Flannery, I do believe you made that argument before." And so I thought for a second, and I realized that I had. And I said, "Well, Your Honor, you're absolutely right, I have. And I suppose it is because when I stop talking, you're going to make a decision, and I can't figure out what that is." So the judge laughed and said, "You may continue, Mr. Flannery." And I said, "No, I think I've said what I have to say, thank you." He did rule for me. It was a bail motion, and it was granted for my client. But there is that aspect for any litigator, however one may be critical of the current defense in this case, and or the prosecution. But it has to be a responsible way of going forward. This defense attorney apparently doesn't understand the meaning of a cross-examination leading question. He doesn't understand the value of scoring points clearly and not wandering off like this is some civil deposition in which the jury is just dying to hear you talk about and blather on forever about things having nothing to do with the case. And even to say it that way, I think, says what is wrong with how the defense is approaching this. And we can't discount the fact that this defense attorney, this, as I understand it, is his second criminal defense case ever. Now, does that mean he can't be a good lawyer? Well, no, but he has two things against him. One is perhaps the experience to say to his client, "No, I'm not doing that, get another attorney if you want to do it that way." And of course the inexperience. So the combination of the inexperience and doing what Trump wants is kind of a rich and troubling brew for a good defense here. There is talk about Bob Costello testifying. Bob Costello was is a former assistant U.S. attorney. Our offices were next to each other when we were in the Southern District of New York. He's always been close to Rudy Giuliani, and he's represented him in these matters. And he's also sued him for $1 million or $2 million to be paid. At some point or other, he acted as a conduit, whether it was Cohen who asked him or Costello volunteered to do it, to encourage, through Giuliani to Trump, to encourage the payment of what was due and owing Cohen for what he did for Trump. And, putting to rest the notion that there could be a man who would who would volunteer to come up with $120,000 himself to buy silence for Trump in a presidential election, that's a hard argument to swallow. So what do I see? I'm afraid that we may get hope from the International Criminal Court, but we may not get a result. The pressure of the nation states doesn't appear to make any difference at all. The death of the head of Iran may make some difference, depending upon how hardline or softer is the succeeding leader. As you know, the president of Iran died in a helicopter crash. And I thought the delay last evening when they were talking about it was to figure out how they go forward so that they can reassure the nation state of Iran that they know what they're doing. At this point, I think they do have a temporary leader. As for the court, there's a good chance that we could finish the actual trial today. It may not happen if this, if the quote cross-examination continues ad infinitum. So here I am, Oceanside, feeling good about myself and about you and about the case, but concerned about the Middle East. So I hope to walk and talk here or back home in Virginia soon. All the best. Bye-bye.